Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of Roadie Storytime. Currently live on Twitch. Hello, Twitch chat. You guys are still kind of in perpetual timeout. Someday you might be freed. To everybody that's watching on YouTube later, if you want to join while we do these stories live, you can go to twitch.tv/TankTheTech. But today, we're going to talk about the story of how I got on a Van Halen tour. Was pretty much immediately hated by everybody on that tour. This was also the tour that was like my biggest learning experience and growth that I've ever been on. And it's just kind of fun thinking back to all this stuff. Really quick before we start, it's kind of funny. Like, I know everybody that watches this channel regularly knows my background and, you know, has no doubts or questions, but I've had some comments on the other Roadie Storytime videos where people are like, dude, how do we know you're not just making everything up? Like, you could just be over embellishing and lying about all these tours you've been on. And I was like, well, yeah, if you weren't there, fair point to bring up, but I don't feel like I need to defend myself, but just to get rid of any questions that there may be, there you go. There's my actual tour book from the Van Halen tour that I was on. And for those of you that are just like, you could have bought that on eBay or whatever. Maybe, I don't know if roadies are selling this on eBay. Maybe I should. Maybe I could actually make some money on this. There you go. Merchandise. Ian Roberts, that's me. And Steve Lewis, who will be a part of this story anyway, so I don't care about showing his name. Kit the Drum Tech says a paper tour book, a rare relic. Yeah, you don't get these much anymore, man, because everybody uses Master Tour and stuff nowadays. These are just, you either used paper tour books back in the day, or when you're working for like an older artist with an older TM that just likes to do books, but you don't see these anymore, man. I mean, this thing's 13 years old, but anyways, let's jump into the story. So the last time we were doing Roadie Storytime, we were talking about how I got on to the Nickelback tour to do merchandise, which was, you know, at that point in my career, easily the biggest tour I'd ever done. And I got on that tour working for a merchandise company that placed me out there. And what I didn't realize at the time was they were basically kind of testing me out to see if they could put me on other tours. And at the end of the Nickelback tour, they asked me if I wanted to go home for a break or if I wanted to go to another tour. And being younger and single at the time, I was like, yeah, just send me to another tour. Like, I don't want to go home. So they told me they were going to send me out to be the assistant merchandise manager on the Van Halen tour that was going on. And at the time, I think it had already gone through maybe a couple weeks of dates before I went out there. They had to move somebody off of it to put me on. But I finished the Nickelback tour in Pittsburgh and flew to Tulsa, Oklahoma to start the Van Halen tour. Zach A in chat just said, is this the 07-08 tour? No, this was 2012. This was, I believe the tour was called A Different Kind of Truth. It was the tour based off that album that they released. So this was around late April, early May of 2012 when this started. So I fly out to Tulsa, Oklahoma for the first show of the tour, and flying into a tour while it's already started is always kind of weird because everybody out there kind of already knows each other and they know everybody's, you know, roles and jobs, and being the new person walking in is kind of weird because I don't really know anybody and I don't know how the system of the operation is working. And, you know, it was just a weird feeling. So I get to the airport, I take a cab to the arena. Of course, it's a cab because Ubers weren't a thing back then. And I get there, and when I get there, I call the lead merchandise manager for the tour to meet and talk and get to know each other. And, you know, we meet on the back dock. I believe it was, what's the arena in Tulsa? The BOK Center. I don't know if it's still called that now. This was years and years ago. I know it was up until about 5 or 6 years ago, but we meet at the docks of the BOK Center. And I was a little surprised to find out that the lead merchandise manager at the time was actually probably only about 5 or 6 years older than me, because most everybody else on the Van Halen tour was a little older for the most part. I mean, it's Van Halen, you know, a lot of the crew people out there were people that have been with them for years and stuff like that. Yeah, he kind of just, you know, showed me the lay of the land, if you will. And, you know, we had a semi truck for all the merchandise and stuff like that. And took me into production and introduced me to everybody. And, you know, it was a large tour, man. I mean, there were a lot of crew people. You know, most arena tours will have like a tour manager and a production manager and stuff like that. But this tour office was like tour management, road management, production manager, production coordinator, We had multiple security people on this tour. One that was the head of security, another couple that were, actually, I think it might have only been one, but for sure there were at least two. One that was overall security, one that was in charge of the band. But after getting my credentials, and at that point I knew better than to keep my roadie resume like I did on the Nickelback tour. I just had my one Van Halen laminate and that was it. And we got to work. And the way that we operate merchandise out of semis on tours like this is that it basically really is a warehouse on wheels. If I have a picture, I'll throw it on screen, but we keep an aisle down the middle of the semi and then we stack boxes to the ceiling on either side with, everything in size order, in shirt design order, stuff like that. And as an assistant merchandise manager, my job is to basically take care of the organization of the truck and kind of do the grunt work, I guess is a good way to put it. Usually the lead merchandise managers on tours will handle paperwork, advancing, accounting, settlements, all the logistical stuff like that. And the assistant is the one that's doing all the physical work in the truck. So to be honest, this first part of this day, my first day on the Van Halen tour, went over pretty well for the most part. I kind of just did my job in the truck because we had a huge delivery that day and I really didn't have time to do much of anything else. But there was one interesting thing that happened on this very first day, and it was about showtime. There is a very weird quirk on the Van Halen tour that nobody told me about. And that is that when changeover starts from the opening act to Van Halen, and the opening act on this tour was actually Kool and the Gang, which was kind of wild. They have a lockdown rule on this tour. So that means that when changeover starts, the whole building backstage is on lockdown. Nobody can come in or out. And this is due to, from what I was told, airflow. The story that I was told was that David Lee Roth is very particular about the conditions of the air in arenas. And there's actually evidence of this online. He has stopped shows on this tour to complain about air conditioning and airflow in the arenas, which always made it kind of entertaining.
Wait a second, Alex. Wait a second. Now, guys, I apologize. We have it that they don't turn these blowers on. Somebody intentionally put the blowers on here, and it's turning into a refrigerator up here on the stage. It's blowing on us. It's going to cause us to fuck our voices up. How about you and your bullshit fucking blowers? Stop it and dis-fucking-peer. I apologize on behalf of these guys. We asked them in the beginning, you're going to get a much better show if they turn their bullshit off.
But he didn't like airflow in the building. So before they played, they would put the backstage on lockdown because any air pressure in and out, I guess, would make Dave weirded out. And I never saw this with my own eyes, but I was told by other people on the crew that before the show, our production manager would walk around with Dave around the backstage and the sides of the stage. And Dave would have him hold up a lighter. And if the flame on that lighter flicked, it means there's air coming in from somewhere, and Dave was not happy about that. Again, never saw that happen in person, but it was a known thing on that tour from what I was told. But you need to know all that for what happened to me. During changeover, I go into our merchandise semi to do an ad, a pull, which is just adding more merchandise to the stands in the arena. And as I'm in the nose of the truck pulling merchandise, I start hearing clicking of the bay door, like closing, because our truck was pulled up to a dock and there's bay doors there. And I turn real quick and I look, and our production manager is standing outside of the bay door with his finger on the button, closing it, and just looking at me with no explanation. Literally, like dead face, just looking at me, finger on the button, just like, and the door is just closing. And I'm just like, okay, interesting. So I get on my radio and I call the main merchandise manager. I'm like, hey man, PM just locked me in the back of the truck and the bay door's closed. And yeah, I don't know what's going on here. And he's like, oh, I forgot to tell you about the lockdown thing, dude. Yeah, he's like, is the side door of the truck open? And I was like, no. Because most semi trucks have side doors so that you can get in the side if you can't get in the back. But it was closed and it was locked. And he told me he didn't have the key for it. Our driver did, and our driver was sleeping in his cab. And he's like, man, I really don't want to have to wake up the driver right now. He's like, just wait a few minutes and I'll see if I can sneak you out of there. And about 20 minutes went by and the bay door never opened. And at that point, he's finally just like, all right, I'll wake up the driver and get the key. And he did. And he got me out the side door so we could do our ads and stuff. But he's like, yeah, just know going forward, dude, like you cannot be in the truck or anything like that. Like it's everything will go on lockdown. And, you know, I'm just like, weird. Okay. Whatever. Sorry, Andre just said no hotel for the driver. Actually, most semi drivers don't get hotel rooms because they have sleeper cabs in their truck, but they will get buyouts instead of getting a hotel, usually like $100 or maybe a little more or something like that. Bus drivers are the only ones that always get hotels because they don't sleep on the actual buses. Truck drivers have a place to sleep, so they'll take a hotel buyout and they stay in the trucks. So we finished that show that night. We get everything packed up and stuff. And I believe the next night, I'm going to look it up really quick just so I know for sure. Yeah, the next show was supposed to be in Salt Lake City and it got canceled for some reason. I don't know what that actual reasoning is, but that means we had like 4 days off to get to Tacoma, Washington. So anyways, we got some days off. We drive out to Tacoma, Washington, and we got to Tacoma, I believe, like the 2 nights before the show. So we had a night off and then a full day off. And during our day off, I kind of had nothing to do. And that evening, I just went to the hotel bar because I figured some of the other roadies would be down there and I could maybe get to know some people and stuff like that. And I texted our main merchandise manager and was like, hey, you want to get a drink? And long story short, we met downstairs at the hotel bar. And a lot of the other roadies from other departments, like video departments, lighting departments, stuff like that came down. I got to meet some people, and I will admit, I don't think I left a good impression that night. Because you got to remember, I was like 24 at the time, and I was like a young whippersnap kid, and I had an ego, and I kept name dropping all these tours that I did to everybody, and nobody cares at that level. They're like, who cares? You got to imagine, like some of the only tours I did before that were like, you know, Nickelback right before that, but you know, like Red and then some other Christian bands. And they're probably like, who the fuck is Red? Like, you know what I mean? So nobody at that level cares who you've worked for before. So they probably thought I had an ego and I was name dropping and stuff. And that night, you know, I had a lot of drinks and stuff and then decided to go to bed. And the next morning we were supposed to have our bus call, which is when the bus picks us up from the hotel to take us to the venue. It was supposed to be at like 7 a.m. So I set my alarm for like 6:30 a.m. and I go to bed and the next morning I wake up and I realize right when I wake up that it's like very light in my hotel room and I'm like weird. So I look at my phone and it's like 9:30 in the morning. Bus call was supposed to be at 7. I've got tons of missed calls from our main merchandise manager, tons of text messages, and I'm just like, oh my God, like second day of the tour and I've missed bus call. And when you miss bus call on a tour, you're on your own. Like the bus isn't coming back to get you. You need to figure things out. And luckily this wasn't a situation where we were driving somewhere else. Like it was just to the venue and the venue was only a few miles away. It was the Tacoma Dome. So I got a cab again because Ubers weren't a thing. And I get to the arena and this was the day that I realized how fast information and gossip spreads on tour. By the time I got to that arena at about 10 a.m., 3 hours late, totally my fault. Like, I don't know if I slept through my alarm or if it never went off or whatever, but I get to the arena and the second I walk in, I mean, every single person that I walked by is just like looking at me like this asshole. So I've already got that reputation of like new guy missing fucking bus call, can't be professional. I went into the production office for something that morning and our production coordinator, Charity, who, to this day, we are actually very good friends. Charity is actually, I've had Charity on the channel before. She's the current A&R rep in Nashville for JH Audio. Even she gave me a hard time. And at the time, I didn't really know her. But I walked into the production office and she's like, oh, you're finally here, huh? And I'm just like, yeah. And like, even the tour manager and everybody else were just giving me looks like, Kit the drum tech said, nice of you to join us, that kind of vibe. Yeah, it was that kind of vibe for sure. It's kind of in that moment, they're like, great, the new guy that we got to be on this tour is just an unprofessional kid that can't handle himself. So I'm already just like, oh, God. Knew that I kind of messed that up. And, you know, even the main merchandise manager on the tour kind of was giving me a really hard time all day. And it was funny because we were similar in age and stuff like that. I do feel like with me and him at the start of this tour, there was like some kind of like ego clashing where we each, you know, were the younger people on the tour and we wanted everybody to think we were better than the other person. And I get along with this guy now. You know, this was years ago, but at the time it was very weird. It was a very awkward day. It was one of those, you know, you ever remember like getting in trouble at school or something, or getting called to the principal's office, and then the rest of the day it just feels weird and everybody's talking about you and looking at you? Like, that's kind of what it felt like. Felt like a total asshole. Got through my work day and, you know, just did my job and stuff. And little did I know that same day I was going to have another asshole moment. Because that night after the show in Tacoma, we were crossing the border to go to Vancouver, which means international border, like you're stopping and getting passports checked and stuff like that. And as all the buses are getting ready to roll, Charity, the production coordinator, goes bus to bus and is just like, hey, everybody make sure you have your passports. I don't want to know what you guys do after shows and stuff, but if you guys have any weed or any drugs or whatever, like, make sure they're off the bus. We're not messing with that on an international border. And we're like, yeah, you know, whatever. She's like, and make sure you have your paperwork ready if you have any like criminal records or arrests or anything like that. And in that moment, my heart kind of sank because, I've told some of you before, but like I got arrested when I was 18 and it was a criminal record. Now it is completely cleared on my record. I have no issues. But back then I did have a criminal record, and I followed her off the bus and I was like, hey, what do you mean by paperwork? Because I do have a record. And she's like, what? She's like, have you been to Canada before? And I was like, no. She's like, but you have a passport. And I was like, yeah. She's like, what were you arrested for? She's like, was it like DUI or anything like that? Because Canada is really strict on DUIs. And I was like, no. I got arrested for, and this is actually a story for another time that we could get into because it's actually a wild story. I was charged officially with felony assault of an officer, like felony. And she's like, and you have no paperwork with you. It's like, no. She's like, you better hope you get across the border. Because if you don't, you're staying there and you're finding your way home. Because like big tours like this, like they do not mess around with stuff like that, man. Like if you get caught at a border with like drugs or you get denied entry for your record, like tours aren't going to hang back for you, dude. Like you're on your own. So I was so nervous, dude. I was like freaking out. The drive from Tacoma to Vancouver is not long at all. So I sat up in the jump seat next to the bus driver because I didn't want to be the inconvenience if they had to come up and get me or anything like that. And when we got to the border, that guy gave the passports to the border patrol agent. And I was just like, oh my God. It's like, I'm freaking out. Like absolutely freaking out. Yeah, it felt like an eternity. And then the agent walks in, scans all of our passports, comes back. And when they came back, I'm just like, oh God, here we go. And they just handed the passports to the driver and they're like, you're good to go. And it was really funny because when we started driving into Canada, even though I'm American and we were driving into Canada, my feeling in that moment was like, freedom! Like, I can't believe I actually like made it through there. Like knowing what I know now, because now after that incident happened, like I talked to my lawyer, we got all this stuff worked out. I got the paperwork that was necessary and stuff like that. Because when you have a record in the US, it doesn't matter to Canada. Like even if you've served time or gone to jail or anything like that, like Canada basically looks at your record and they treat you as if you committed the crime there and haven't like done time or had a punishment or anything. So for future tours, I definitely had to have paperwork in order because 9 out of 10 times, like I was getting pulled off the bus and questioned, but I've never been denied entry to Canada or any other country on the planet because I took care of everything. And nowadays I don't even need it because my record is clean. But anyways, so we get to the hotel in Vancouver. And that day, they actually changed out main merchandise managers. They sent the guy that was out with us up to that point for the first few shows I was there, or the first 2 shows I was there. They sent him to another tour. I think it was like One Direction or something. It was something huge, like that. It was like first tour. And they were sending a new merchandise manager out. And the office had told me like, hey, we're going to send you a new guy out there. His name's Steve. They're like, he's interesting. They're like, some people get along with him great. Other people don't. So, but just know that he is an absolute legend in this industry. So just listen to what he says and you'll work fine with him. And I'm just like, okay, this is like, I'm already like nervous. So we get to the hotel in Vancouver and there's I get a phone call from Steve. And he's like, hey man, you know, it sounds real rough and gritty. He's like, hey, this is Steve. What hotel room are you in? I want to come up and introduce myself. And yeah, I told him, and like 2 minutes later, there's a knock on my door. And I kid you not, man, like opening the door and seeing this guy for the first time, it just felt like you were seeing like roadie royalty. This guy was the most stereotypical looking roadie. Like I opened the door and I'm pretty sure he was wearing like, you know, jeans, like had a kind of faded, ripped up like Eagles t-shirt on or something, like Eagles, the band, long blondish gray hair. He just looked like a roadie. You're just like, this guy knows shit and he's seen shit. Like and come to find out he did. He'd been touring for like 50 years, dude. Like he started way back in the day with like the Eagles and the Doobie Brothers or maybe it's the Allman Brothers, something brothers. I don't know. But like, dude knows his shit. So he comes into my hotel room and he sits down. And again, remember how I told you how fast information spreads on tour. He sits down and he goes, so I've been told you've got some problems and you don't have a great reputation on this tour. And I'm just like, oh, great. He goes, yeah, I heard you're a little arrogant. You missed bus call for a show. You almost got stuck at a border. He goes, I'm just going to be brutally honest right now and tell you, nobody on this tour likes you and you're going to have to work really hard to make up for your name here. And I'm just like, awesome. Like, this is going to go great. So he goes, what I want you to do for the rest of this tour, because he goes, we're going to be on tour together for the next month and a half. You're going to keep quiet. You're going to keep to yourself. You're going to do what I ask of you. And I'm going to teach you the best way to be a merchandise manager on tour and the best way to act on a tour. And hopefully by the end of this tour, you'll have a good reputation and you'll actually get more tours. And I'm just like, okay. Yeah, it was a big humbling moment. I was just like, okay, well, I am not the hotshot kid I thought I was. So the next show in Vancouver, I did exactly what he said, man. I literally didn't go anywhere but like the office where our merchandise was or the truck. Because when you're doing merchandise on an arena tour, there's no real reason for you to really be all over the place. Like I never needed to be by the stage or anything like that. Just concourse, backstage catering, dressing room, whatever. But yeah, I just kept my mouth shut and like, whatever you need, dude. Like, and he was very old school and was in that mentality of, like I said, where the main merchandise manager is the numbers guy and the assistant is like the workhorse kind of person. Oh, it was straight up like that with him. He'd come to me every morning with a clipboard and a list of the pull, like the merchandise we need to get out for the show. He projected everything, handed me the fucking clipboard and was like, get to work. And I would do the entire pull while he sat out there and had coffee and cigarettes and shit and talked to the people from the venue. And I know that sounds shitty, but it's like, it's not, dude. Like, it's one of those things where you kind of just know your role and know your place on a tour and you just do what you're told and stuff like that. And the guy was great when it came to numbers. His projections were so good because when you're on a tour that size, after you start getting going on the tour, you can project very well what your sales are going to be based off of the certain designs and sizes you've sold already, based on your per head amount. Per head is the big number merchandise managers use. So your per head dollar amount is based on how much money you grossed versus how many people were at the actual show. So for the sake of math, let's say there's 15,000 people at a show and you do $150,000 worth of merchandise. That means that your per head amount is $10. $10 per head. It means on average, every single person that walked through that door spent $10 at the merchandise stand. So that's how we project things with merchandise. But on this tour, we were projecting for way more than that. So, I mean, we were pulling probably like $400,000 worth of merch every day, like for shows. And the main goal is to get as close to selling out everything as possible without running out. Now that rarely happens. You'll often need to go into semis and do merchandise pulls during the show to do ads to the stands, which that was my job. Like I would literally just get a radio call and be like, hey, I'm going to text you an ad. I need you to go get it and then take it up to the concourse. I'm like, okay. So I just grab a cart, go to the truck, get everything, and then take it up there. But Steve was so good at projections, man. There were many days where it was like he was spot on with stuff where we never had to do ads. he spent a lot of time doing numbers and was like, this is what we need and this is what I think we're going to sell today. And it was really good. So we go across Canada on that run. I believe we did like Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, Winnipeg. I think we did Toronto after that, but I can't remember. But then we went back into the States. But we get out of Canada and we get down to Kansas City, I think was our first show after that. No, we did Minnesota and then we did Kansas City. But Kansas City was where all of this kind of turned around for me. We had a good day off in Kansas City where, they did a lot of crew hangs on days off. And I didn't really get invited to a lot of them at the start of the tour, but I did my job well while we were in Canada and I kept to myself and, just did what I was told and tried to stop being like an egotistical kid. So by the time we got to Kansas City for our day off, I got invited to our day off hang, and Charity, again, the production coordinator, was really good at like organizing really cool days off for the crew. And when we were in Kansas City, she had rented out like an entire park district in Kansas City for us to have like a crew softball tournament and cookout and stuff. And that's what we did. We took all the buses from the hotel to this park district and grills out there and had a ton of food and drinks and beer and stuff. And we're going to have a softball tournament. And they ended up splitting up into, I think, like 4 different teams. And they had captains for every team. And the captain of one of the teams was this guy, Thomas. He was the VIP coordinator on the tour. Awesome dude. Absolutely love the guy. He was actually one of the few who, like, since day one of me being out there, was actually very cool to me and was just, I think he recognized like young kid, like, to help him learn. Coincidentally, he's also an A&R rep for JH based in LA now. You're probably wondering, like, how did multiple people on this tour end up becoming A&R reps for JH Audio? Jerry Harvey, the guy that founded JH Audio, who actually also founded Ultimate Ears, who actually literally invented in-ear monitors for bands. He was the monitor engineer on that tour. So I actually got to know Jerry really well. And after that tour, he actually gave jobs to a couple people that were out there. So Thomas ended up being one of the captains of the softball teams. And he and I were very into sports. So we kind of bonded over that earlier on in the tour. And I had told him that I played baseball in college and stuff. And when it got time to pick, with his first pick for his softball team, he's like, I want new guy. Oh, that's another thing about the story. And nobody actually ever called me Ian on that tour. I was just new guy. The whole tour. Like, it was new guy. He goes, I want the new guy. Like, with no hesitation. And while we're picking teams, everybody seemed confused because while I had been doing a good job, like up to that point in the tour from after I got like humbled by Steve, people were still like not really like super cool with me. And they were like, why does he want the new guy so bad? So I think somebody asked him straight up, like, why'd you pick the new guy more than like one of his friends on the tour? And he's like, new guy played college ball. I'm taking him. And some of the people were just like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like, and I did until I blew out my arm. Like, let's be 100% honest here with you guys. I never played one game of baseball in college. I blew out my arm before we even started games. So like I never played a game. After I wrecked my arm in baseball in college, I finished a semester and I dropped out and started touring with my band. Like that was it. But I was decent enough at baseball to go to college and play. So when we started the game, I was the first batter. And in my head, I was like, God, I hope I don't make an idiot of myself right now and fucking just suck, you know? Cause like he hyped me up as being a college baseball player and shit. And like, yeah. First pitch, absolutely cranked a fucking home run. Now it was a softball field, so it was only probably 170 feet or something, but still absolutely cranked a home run. And I was fucking stoked. And it was like, that was like the turning point moment of the tour for me, where like everybody on my team was like, fuck yeah. Like, and then hanging out the rest of the day, just having some drinks and grilling with people. Like at some point, I remember, I don't think Eddie was there, but I know Alex and Wolfgang showed up at some point with their buses and like hung out with everybody and stuff like that. And, that day was just really cool, man. I actually got to know everybody and yeah, exactly. Like some people are like, all right, the new guy's all right. Like, you know, this is fun. So The rest of that tour after that actually ended up going well. With Steve's guidance as a lead merchandise manager, I learned how to just do my job correctly. And more importantly, I learned how to act on tour. I mean, he'd been doing it for so long that he treated me, or he taught me how to treat people, interact with people, and how to carry yourself on a tour. And I will forever be grateful for that. And it was funny. I just had brought up like Alex and Wolfgang Van Halen, and I only had one brief interaction with Eddie on that whole tour. I literally just met the guy. That was it. Like, it was that large of a tour. And I didn't really have any reason to interact with Eddie. Like I wasn't his tech or anything like that. But David Lee Roth, let's just talk about David Lee Roth really quickly. When I started that tour, I noticed right away that like the Van Halens and DLR, like they never parked near each other. They never had dressing rooms near each other. They entered from different sides of the stage. Like they didn't really talk to each other. And I didn't know if it was just like, you know, that classic DLR Van Halen beef you always heard about or whatever. But I was actually told by some people on that tour, they're like, if you ever see him backstage, like take your first immediate turn or turn around, like do not have an interaction with that guy. Like apparently the first like month of the tour, he had like 12 people fired for anything. Like, he didn't like the shirt you're wearing, you're fired. Like, I don't know if that's like actually literally true, but like, that's what I was told by crew people out there. They're like, the less he sees you, the better, because if he doesn't like something about you, he'll go to management and tell him he wants you replaced. So for a lot of that tour, I was kind of like, if I ever did see him come in, I kind of just like snuck off into a corner. But there was one day where I had an interaction with Dave where I was doing merch and he was just out by the dock coming in and he's just like, hey man, how's it going? And he was like, actually like really like, hey brother. Like he didn't say brother, but that's the vibe he had. And I don't know if it was because I was a merch guy and he knew I was making them or helping make them money, but he was absolutely super cool to me on that interaction that I had with him. Like he was just like, yeah man, make that money. You know, it's just, he was super buddy with me. And I only had a few more interactions with him on the rest of the tour after that. But every time I saw him, he was like, he's like, hey, how's it going, man? Like really cool. So I'm not saying that he wasn't cool with was cool with everybody else or wasn't cool or anything like that. But the personal experiences I had with him were actually fine. Yana just says because you were hated and he sympathized. No, I don't know. I always want to throw that out there because like every interaction I had with the guy was like completely like normal and fine. But yeah, there's video evidence, like I said, online that I will have showed in this video where like he's had freakouts on stage, freakouts on other people. Like this is another tour rumor. I don't know if this is true, but I heard that his bus driver on that tour, I heard that the bus company bought the bus driver a brand new car as a bonus after that tour for sticking it out with an entire tour driving for David Lee Roth. Cannot confirm that, but I was told that because I guess it's very hard to be a bus driver for David Lee Roth. But anyways, for the remainder of the tour, man, like I said, I did my job. I kept my head down. I was cool with everybody and I started opening up with people and getting to know people. And, you know, one of the biggest moments on this tour by the end of it was our last day off. Our last show of this tour was at the arena in New Orleans. And that last night off, I had not planned on going out at all, but I'm glad I did. I remember sitting in my hotel room. It's like 8:00 at night and I was playing Mass Effect 3. I just ripped the entire Mass Effect series. And I was trying to finish Mass Effect 3. I had this little like portable like briefcase thing that I had for my Xbox that had a screen in it that I would set up in hotel rooms and play games and stuff. And I got a text message from one of the crew guys. It was like, hey man, a bunch of us are going out to Broadway. You should come with. Or Broadway, that's Nashville. Bourbon Street. You should come with. And I was like, I don't know. And finally I played video games for like 10 more minutes. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to go out. So I was like, have you guys left yet? And he's like, no. So I was like, okay, I'm going to come with you. So I go downstairs and it's a lot of the crew. It's like a lot of the audio people, lighting, Charity was with us. The singer for Kool and the Gang was with the group. And we all hopped Bourbon Street pretty much all night. I think we were out till like 4 or 5 a.m. But that night was so fun. And we went to so many places. And it was also the night that I gained a new reputation on the tour as the running man. Now, it's kind of dumb talking about it now, but we were going into all these clubs on Bourbon Street that were playing like a lot of hip hop and club music and stuff. And at the time, it's the early 2000s. So we're hearing like Usher, Nelly, Lil Jon and the East Side Boys. And I don't dance well, which is kind of funny because I'm married to a professional dancer. And that night, the drinks were flowing. I still drank back then and stuff like that. So that night, my go-to dance move was just the running man. It's like that scene in Knocked Up with Seth Rogen where he's dancing with Katherine Heigl's character.
Dude, I think he's doing the dice thing too much. That's really all he's got.
That's how I was with the running man. I just get on the dance floor and just start doing it. So the next day, the whole tour was just like, I remember, first of all, everyone on the crew was hungover that next day for the show day because we were all out till super like 5 a.m. and we loaded in at 7. But I remember walking in that morning and getting into the dock and starting to go to the truck and like Charity walks by me and she's like, "Hey, running man." And then the rest of the day, all the other crew people were just like, "Hey, running man." And I'm just like, God, I'm never going to live that one down. Like, but it was fun. And that whole show that day was super fun too, because it was the last show of the tour. And during that course of the tour, there were so many celebrities and other musicians at that tour where every day backstage, I was just like, what the fuck? Like, what are these people? Like, I remember back when we were in LA, like I was in catering one day and fucking Cameron Diaz walks into catering and I'm just like, that's random. Cameron Diaz doesn't strike me as the kind of person that'd be at a Van Halen show, but with celebrities, I'm sure they just want to go to big events. But that day I ran into Morgan Rose from Seven Dust when we were in New Orleans, and we walked by each other backstage, and he didn't know me by name, but I knew he recognized me. I was like, "Hey Morgan, how's it going?" And he's like, "I know you from somewhere." And I was like, "Yeah, years ago I worked for Red and we did some tours together." And he's like, "Oh, no way, man." Yeah. He's like, "That's wild going from Red to Van Halen." And Morgan's always been one of my favorite drummers ever. And he's such a kind, nice person. So it was cool to like run into him after a few years. And that whole day was just super fun. And it was kind of bittersweet because I had actually like turned my reputation around on that tour and I was legitimately gonna be like missing a lot of those people. But the biggest moment for me was in catering that day. Our touring promoter from Live Nation came up to me, and this guy is sorry, Cody just said back to name dropping. Yeah, well, I mean, if I didn't name drop in these stories, you'd complain that I wasn't telling the stories in depth enough, so whatever. That day, the Live Nation touring promoter rep came up to me, and this guy, more so than anybody on the entire tour, maybe aside from the head security guy, one of the most intimidating people I've ever been around. Like 6'3", 6'4", big, huge guy, always wearing button-up shirt, tight jeans, and a cowboy hat, literally. This guy did not like me at the start of the tour, and he was very intimidating. He comes up to me in catering, and he's like, "New guy, let me talk to you real quick." And I'm just like, oh God, what did I do? And he pulls me aside outside catering, and he goes, "Hey man, I just wanted to let you know that you started this tour off horribly." And I'm just, in my head, I'm just like, oh God, great. He's like, "You started this tour off horribly." He goes, "I legitimately thought there was no hope for you. I thought you were going to get fired at some point on this tour." But he's like, "I gotta say, you turned it around more so than what I thought was capable of. And you proved that you are a professional and you can do this job at this level." And he shook his hand out to shake my hand. And he goes, "I just want you to know that you, like, I'm very proud of what I saw in you. And I would welcome you on any one of my tours that I do in the future." And I'm just like, wow. Like, that, I think that was the biggest wake up call, or biggest moment. That was probably one of the more important moments for me as a roadie, where I was like, yeah, this is it. This is the job that I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Like, that's the tour where I learned what it is to be a roadie, how you work, how you handle things, how you treat people on the road. And that right there was like my moment that made me realize, like, okay, I figured it out. And yeah, we wrapped up that tour that night, and I flew home for a couple weeks, and it was just great because I had made friends with so many people that I keep up with to this day, people that I've worked with again in the future. It was one of those moments, looking back on it now, where I could have ruined my entire reputation and career with the way that tour started and how I was acting. And it was a sink or swim moment. Had I not figured it out, I probably would not have been working in this industry or working at a lower level in this industry. I would have been back to club bands, and not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just, that's not what I want to do with my career. I wanted to progress to work with big tours and make a name for myself in this industry, because my ultimate goal at the time was eventually I always wanted to be a tour manager. And had I not been able to figure out how to survive as a merch manager on that tour, it would have never happened. So yeah, that experience for me was fantastic at the end of it. And I learned a lot. And like I said, I went home for a couple weeks, and then immediately after that, went back out with Steve on another tour. We did Journey together. So I did an entire summer arena tour with Journey. And also on that tour is how I met Pat Benatar and Neil Giraldo, and then eventually started working for them as well. So that's a whole nother thing too, because that's just wild how things work out like that in the industry. But yeah, that's going to be it for this one. I guess moral of the story is just, when you're presented with a sink or swim opportunity in this industry, yeah, it can go one of two ways. And I am very fortunate that I was able to listen and learn and learn how to do things the right way. So thank you to everybody that was here live on Twitch. I appreciate you guys being in chat. And again, just as a reminder to everybody on YouTube, if you want to join us for when we do these live, we also do like reactions and a lot of other stuff on Twitch. You can go to twitch.tv/TankTheTech. I'm also on a ton of different social media. TankTheTech, or @TankTheTech, is my handle on just about everything. But until next time, wherever you are in the world, be safe, be kind to each other. I love you all, and I'll be back very soon.